Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. Today I woke up, very cheerful. I don't know why. I didn't even have a dream. But I thought, since the morning, I've been thinking of giving an episode where I felt like going over this idea, this sort of trio I have developed of what I call the visible body, the invisible mind, and the inconceivable soul. And I noticed that I saw this video that there's a lot of people from the West going to, certain parts of the world that are, let's say, spiritually known. And I wanted to talk about the idea of the soul very casually. Just very casually I want to talk about the inconceivable. And so the title of today's episode is Visibly Invisible and Invisibly Inconceivable. Hopefully my voice is loud and clear and the music's fine in the background, So let me see, where can I begin? I guess I can begin, from my own story. I was born in Iran, and religion, Iran is a theocratical society, and so at a young age, just being a young kid in Iran, it's as if I could see the religious level of meaning in the environment. And so there was the idea of religion, there was the idea of God, and then there came the idea of the soul. And the idea of the soul was fascinating, but it didn't become fascinating for me until 2011. And prior to that, guys, I remember this, at the age of 11, when I was 11 years old, I remember, I even have the notebook today, I wrote my first article on the mind. And so let me tell you how it was. The environment was giving me a religious idea. My real life father is a very, I would say, spiritual oriented person. And so there was the idea of spirit, the idea of soul. And then it was as if I felt like these two positions had been covered and only the mind was left unknown. So at the age of 11, I remember I write this article, and I had so many typos. One day I'll take a picture of it and I'll show it to the viewers what I wrote. But pretty much I fathomed it that it was as if the human being has many keys in its hand, and the mind is like pretty much this massive room with doors. And so it's as if to unlock the mind is to find the right key and find the right door. And some doors may be empty inside, some keys may not work, Anyways, life went forth. I remember I had a bit of curiosity about the mind. I have a twin brother, and since youth, my twin brothers had a very phenomenal imagination. I remember when I was younger, my imagination was like I could just see giant letters on walls. I didn't feel I had a sort of initiating awareness in the moment for imagination. Initiating imagination in the moment. But due to, I would say, life circumstances and karma, upon realizing something important about the nature of how I'm being, the relationship of my mind with myself and my world changed. And I guess that would be the starting point, right? Because here, I'll bring out the notepad. So here we have a human being. And let us say that the human being has a body, has a mind, and has a soul. In my youth, this was visible, okay? When I say my imagination wasn't active when I was younger, that would be in some sense how my mind remained invisible to me. You see, the mind is such a fascinating thing, because from one angle, it's as if there is no mind. The mind is just the relationship of a physical dimension with a non-physical dimension, you know. But from another angle, the mind is in some sense a sort of non-physical, still relevant to visibility, but non-physical. It's as if one can see the mind as a bridge, or they can see it as a dimension of its own. The mind, the way we know how it happens is actually by movement. If we, for example, people say, I want to see it to believe it, you know, that's in some sense the shape, the object, the matter, the substance being there in front. But when we look at the mind is that which moves. So anytime, anywhere in the moment, there's something that moves, we consider that to be mind, okay? And what is memory? It is remembered movements in the space-time continuum. It is accumulated eventhood. Anyways. So, what I'm trying to say is the dimension of the body, it's that we have to have a relationship with visible dimensions of being. Here, let me say that the human being actually divides into being and doing, okay? The human being does stuff and the human being is being something. Now, if we consider the three dimensions of body, mind, soul, you can, in my model, you can choose to see it this way, or if you're a materialist, you can choose to see it this way, doesn't matter. One can choose to see that the body is the edge of the kingdom, and so the mind is in some sense the village inside the kingdom, and in some sense the soul is the king in the kingdom. Or one can choose to see in another way where it's as if the body is in some sense the king. The mind is the kingdom, is the cities in the kingdom, and the soul is the edge of the kingdom, the walls of the kingdom. And so what it means is that human beings are materialistically and immaterialistically inclined. It's as if, since we have a cause and effect, modality to life, either the causal position is material or immaterial. I would say the biggest difference between a materialist and an immaterialist is in some sense that for the immaterialist, they don't believe that this moment they are existing in is the causal position of being. For the materialist, physical existence is the causal position. You know, it's like honestly two rooms. It's two sides of a coin. Which side does the person look at first? When I say material, immaterial, immaterial means unknown. That means somebody's like, what is something, you know, immaterially made of, you know, and it's made of, in some sense, not known. And what is matter? Matter is known. And how do we know something? For example, how do we know there are subatomic particles? It's because we saw shape to energy with substance. You know, it's like this question where we get to a point where we are like, what is the periodic table made of? And eventually we reach an irreducible moment in our reverse engineering. This is the cool thing about life, that when a human being actually goes towards knowledge, when you have a sort of Raja Yogian effort, what you soon realize is that everything that has meaning has a starting point, and everything that can become meaningless has an ending point. Meaning is the start. The meaningless is the end. So pretty much, let me see if I could draw this differently here. And for the body, for the sense of being and doing, you can say there's a relationship of body, mind, soul for these two. Oh my god, guys, 2 viewers. This is great. 2 advanced moments. I'm trying to think how I would say this here. I gotta draw it like this. So, I guess when I'm here, I gotta. So we have this being the lifetime. And so we know that the body is like a bell curve. This is the body. When we have the mind is actually a sort of on and off. So the mind is strangely behaving like this. And I would say, in some sense, what is the soul? I would say the soul would be a straight line, maybe. So this curvy line is the mind, and the straight line is the soul. Okay. And I mean, I think I drew the sine wave a bit too big, but here, let me see. It's a terrible sine wave, but the idea is that one day we open our eyes in a world, okay, and we receive information, and we are being a sort of unique information, in being uniquely in a formation. And so based on what there is and what we have and what we can access, I would say the meaning of stuff projects. Right? When I look at my biological body, I'm like, man, this biological body is like a traveler. At some point, it's going to exit its organizational structure. Right? That means it's like after 100 years, the human being's like, okay, I've become older than an old man. You know? There was this show, guys, this Japanese comic book made into an anime, and there was like this immortal being in it, you know, and there was this other, you know, magician who had become the sage or something, not sage, this mage, you know, this wizard or something that had lived like 200 years, and this other magician, other mage who was like who was like, you know, like thousands and thousands of years old. He was looking at the, you know, the mage who was like, you know, a couple hundred years old as a baby. Like it's like immortal beings look at old people as children, you know. Like newborn babies, you know. So like 100-year-old person is gonna be like a newborn baby to like an immortal being, you know. Oh man. Oh man. Anyways, hopefully, you know, I can take myself seriously this episode. So pretty much there's the journey of the body. What happens to the body? The body starts from the unknown. And then goes to the known. Is this handwriting? And then goes back to the unknown. That's pretty much the body's journey. Now the mind is very different. The body is, in some sense, I would say the mind I guess, sure, just like the biological body is born, at some point the individual consciousness and the child develops, and the child's like, oh my god, I'm being a person right now, right? So technically the mind also starts from unknown. And this is the cool thing, where the mind is not just in a fully known and semi-unknown. And then goes back to the unknown. And the soul, oh my god, the soul. It's like the soul's heroic journey is that it is in some sense unknown, going to the unknown, going to the unknown. Or guys, just forget what I wrote. Pretty much this is what I'm doing. I'm saying the human being, we divide it into 3 dimensions. Okay, this is traditional spirituality, guys. I'm just reinterpreting it. For the body is known. What is the quality of knowledge? Visibility. So the body is visible. It's like when we look in the mirror, there's something to look at, you know. Now, when somebody tries to look at their mind in the mirror, in some sense, the mind is unknown, to be honest. It is known when it manifests, but it's here. I'll say it. The mind is semi-known, semi-unknown. It's like the mind can't make up. Hilariously, the mind can't make up its mind, whether it's a body or a soul. You know. And the soul is unknown, all right? That's the whole point. You know, all spiritual people at some point realize, or any truth seeker, at some point you're going to realize that in order to access a truth beyond yourself, you have to go back to the moment when yourself happened. That means technically there's 2 ways, I would say, to get liberated beyond memory. Either you go back to your earliest memory and wonder who was watching your first memory ever. It's like, how do you remember your earliest memory? And then it's like there's an unknown witness there. Or the person, for a second, just stops identifying as an individual where the construct of memories apply. And so when you experience a moment where you're allowing the world to be itself before you are being anything, you access a collective unknown. So in front of your eyes, a collective unknown. Behind your eyes, an individual unknown. I would say I am a person who I have reached that point. I mean, I shouldn't say I have reached that point. It's like at some point, from all the stories given to the body, mind, and spirit, I'll tell you this, my real father, he's someone who considers the idea of past lives very real. And he asked me once, well, how do I perceive the view of past lives? And even in these talks of mine, I think I may be one of the few people actually talking about the future self. I actually think I may be one of the early birds to even consider that all metaphysical, spiritual psychology is actually for the future's intervention into the present by, in some sense, releasing the past from the present. So my father asks me, hey Amin, what do you think about past lives? And I remember I told him an answer that he got actually a bit surprised. And I told him that I can't even consider a past life and future life to myself, because this existence, this person I'm being right now is like the tip of the iceberg. It's a tiny percentage of what is actually being. You see, dear listeners, we are a species that has opened its eyes in the void. We are intelligent. We're wondering if the intelligence just comes from the body or if it comes from the environment. Do you know? And in reality, when we think about it on a, let's say, epigenetical level, or anything that's a factor outside of the body, it's like, sure, most people, I would say there's no such thing as thinking for yourself, because the self exists in a collective position where you have to have the thoughts of the world there. Just like we need the letters, we need to learn letters, and then we need to learn words, and then we use these words, right? It's like, just like there's an alphabet to language, there's an alphabet to image, right? Really, to me, what personality is how much a person has observed what they are being, and what is the finale of their acceptance as some sort of individualism. Now, if the mind is semi-known, semi-unknown, it means it's invisible. And if I was to say the mind, the soul being unknown, the soul is technically something, or is a state where the body's movements and the mind's movements are being observed simultaneously. A friend of mine had this yoga post on Facebook, and he tells me that niyamas and yamas are very important. That means there's a sort of ethical entrance into yoga, the first two limbs of yoga. So anyways, he was telling me about yoga, and I write a question where I was actually a bit fascinated by my own question, where I tell him, if I don't identify as a body or a mind, is yoga necessary? And this lovely friend of mine responds that if you have realized your nature, it's as if you have realized a freedom that has nothing left to do other than serve. You see, it's as if after you have played the games of individual mastery, it's as if, imagine mastery meant the increase of skill. And so imagine there was this swordsman who, let's say there was this kid, his father, let's say back in the day in like medieval war when they fought with swords and shields, right? And imagine this Japanese kid whose father was a samurai and died in war or something, right? And so this kid every day after completing his duties and tasks throughout the day for the village, he would just go in the forest and practice, let's say, swordsmanship. And imagine you're a person who wants to become a master swordsman, so you practice literally hours and hours to the point where your brain has so many ways of you moving. Literally what training is building enough memories for certainty to become instantaneous, actually. You know, true confidence is being able to stand in the unknown. And I have learned this in certain cases, but in certain, for example, social settings, you know. This kid masters swordsmanship. Imagine this kid becomes the greatest samurai, the greatest warrior, the greatest swordsman ever. Now, after he has, let's not say greatest warrior, the greatest swordsman, that means he has reached the mastery of his skill. So when he has reached the mastery of his skill, it's as if, what does a master swordsman do? In some sense, serve. Right? Or imagine you're a musician who's mastered playing an instrument. What do? You play it in beyond your mind's domain. So similarly, let's say you're a human being where you have mastered, let's say for a second you entertain yogic and Buddhic thought, reincarnation, and you're like, okay, I've been around, for eons, I've been, back and forth in this game of shape and space, And so imagine you have mastered your existence. That means you have mastered existing, which is another way of saying you don't love it or hate it anymore. Because when somebody truly attains mastery, they actually don't need to think about what they're doing anymore. It becomes second nature, just like driving. If you drive for years, after some point you just sit in the car and your body just knows what to do, So what I'm trying to say is that once you master your physical existence, which is another way of saying you have gotten to see the dimensions to physical life, that means you can acknowledge your physical existence. Now imagine one goes to the mastery of mind, and imagine we master our mind, and truly for the human species, I'll be frank, what mastery of mind for the future generations will mean is to be content with being an individually known and unknown being, and collectively being known and unknown. Right now, people don't have the ability to be, I shouldn't say don't have the ability, but it seems to be too much for modern man to wonder if his real self is unknown. That means rather than us being like, okay, some unknown life force is looking out through our eyes, and it has nothing to do with how we move or how we shape it, right? It's as if the movement and the shape, the language that we use to define the subject that is being ourself, it's like those come after the movement, right? You master your body, which is another way of saying you have come to terms with how existence is existing regardless. When I think about my existential purpose, of course, they say for the human species it's reproduction, but from my view is that even if there's reproduction, everything is existing. So technically everybody, for just existing, just by being a breathing creature in the realm, we have completed our cosmic existential purpose. But now when it comes to mastering the mind, this has to do with experience. Okay, and this is where it gets very interesting, because the mind is like how attention is being in two rooms at once, but the body is like how the attention is being in one room at once, right? Like a materialist doesn't want to acknowledge how the mind is like the glow of a candle, right? It's like, the mind's content is, it's like awareness is not an object. right? And consciousness is an attempt to understand awareness as an object, actually. Now, I would say in my own life, if somebody says, Mr. Within, you're talking about mastery of body, mind, and soul, it's like, are you there? You know, have you attained mastery? I will say I have attained what I feel as a human being I have attained is that I have met the unknown, both within and without. And when I say I have met the unknown, that means I reached a point where all my beliefs, all my memories, all my ideas and visions on the world, just like an army marching into the void towards the center of it, towards the source of truth, I suddenly noticed that I am actually being in an unknown way, but all the stuff that I know has to do with what I do. So what I'm trying to say is simply that being is accepting the unknown. This is the greatest spirituality. This is the most honest spirituality. You know, that means I understand the allure of angels and demons and assistance from other realms and, you know, the glory of other dimensions and interdimensional romances, you know. But I will tell you that if we were to be honest, we have to accept the unknown first. And this is what I wasn't taught as a child, but if I had, I would have had a sort of, you know, beyond this world courage in my life. You know, when I look back at my youth, I see myself, it's as if I was a sleeping giant. And we all are. And what the giant is the potential of the ability, the potential of the intelligence. I mean, why should the world be in such a scenario where there is like, how would you say it? There's like 8 billion there's like 8 billion creatures where behind their eyes they have their own private server of their worldview, and then in front of their eyes they're in the same map. It's as if why have 8 billion characters in a multiplayer online game entered the same map? And the idea usually is that there is a quest to be achieved. You know, it's as if you wonder about what you have, and then after you have in some sense basked in how you have the moment, then you in some sense there comes losing the moment. I have reached a point where I was like, okay, the body's just existing, and then I was like, okay, my mind can move experientially in different ways, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute, how is the body being experienced and how is the mind existing? And then I reached a certain point where I would say the unknown started moving. And it's this bizarre view that just like we don't think about our heart, just like we don't think about our breathing, and it is automated beyond the conscious frameworks of the individual, the collective life is also automated. And it's as if if we saw the human and the being as two separate dimensions, as if one dimension you're a life form, in another dimension you're the life force. The life force has been free from the beginning, and the form is bound to the form of anything else it sees. I'm sitting cross-legged, hold on. Gotta diffuse the numbness. Okay. This is, let's say this is Earth realm. In the Earth realm, it's like here. In the spirit realm, I would say in some sense our being is known, and what we do is unknown. So I'm that person saying that this world we're living in is like a coin. Right now we are a self in the world. We are you can say a known self in an unknown world, but beyond the veil of the senses, it's actually we are being a known world, and then there is an unknown self. It's as if the gods don't know who they are, and mankind doesn't know where it is. But the gods know where they are, and mankind knows what it is. Life is very remarkable. Sometimes if there are not limitations to surpass, the meaning of a system becomes void. You know, it's as if what is the purpose of any movement at all? And the answer is if there is potential, it must be activated. Because upon the mastery of the body, what does this mean? That means I don't know. I've done this so many times that I'll just share it. I can in any moment pretty much sit down and just like how I put it, like right now there's a cup of let's say coffee in my hand. I put this cup of coffee on the table and let it go. I can put my body in any moment, and just like this cup I put on the table, I could just sit, and then the body can go in its sort of automated stillness. That means the idea of meditation is you trust how your body is being, and once you trust how your body is being in stillness, you get to see how your mind is moving. Right now, as I'm giving this talk, I am witnessing how my mind is moving. People may think I am this voice. People may think I am the body where this voice is coming from. People may think I'm the subject behind the eyes of this person speaking. But in reality, the total extent of what I have access to as a being in this moment is the whole moment. This is the great realization of beings that no longer their karma is time bound. That means time leaves. Time is something for a changing shape. It's pretty much how shapes are changing, and we are pinpointing it through a sub-level of shapes, you know. What can I say? The unknown was here before anything we can say. I'm gonna put away the notepad, guys, and try to go into a flow for this episode. There's some stuff that can be written down, but in reality, if we can somehow get a species content with its unknown experiential position and known existential position, then in some sense ability activates. You see, there's this idea that people some people, not everybody, but some people, it's very easy for them to be kind to others, but when it comes to themselves, it's not easy to be kind. And there is also this danger of all those who fall in the guru archetype to, in some sense, you see, it's all about getting attached, leading to illusion. Right now, if I get attached to my body, then I forget the other dimensions in motion, and so there is a sort of delusion, you know. That means for somebody saying that I'm a spiritual being and somebody saying I'm a physical creature, they are both extremist modalities when the other side is an option. You see, for the body, things seem to be it's like, the body is in one room, right? The body is like how we customize the character. You know, DNA is a character customization, and DNA is like a person logging into a multiplayer online game. It's your character. Now, in the video game analogy, the character that is being moved in that pixel universe is not being moved by something that is made of pixels. And the notion of, I would say, the unknown soul is really how your mind stops getting convinced by its knowledge and your body becomes silence. I'm not joking. You know, the body, or I'll say it this way, your body cultivates stillness, and your mind cultivates silence. And then anything else that moves is unknown oriented. There's a story I'm gonna find and read for the viewers. So, guys, there's this story, I'm gonna read it from this website. The story is called The King and His 4 Wives. Once upon a time, there lived a king who had 4 wives. The king got seriously ill and was on his deathbed. Afraid to venture into the afterlife alone, he asked his 4th wife, whom he loved the most, and bought her diamond, gold, and elegant clothing, "Would you die with me and go with me to the afterlife?" The 4th wife replied with a sorry saying she can't do that, and walked away. The king also loved his 3rd wife and was very proud and would show her off to the neighboring kingdoms. He called on his 3rd wife and asked the same question, "Would you accompany me to the afterlife?" The 3rd wife replied that she loved her life too much and she cannot go with him, and also that she would remarry on his death. The 2nd wife has always been there for the king in the times of his need. So he asked her, would she accompany him in the afterlife? The second wife apologetically replied that she would not be able to help him this time, but would arrange his funeral and would be there for his funeral. A voice suddenly called out and said, "I will leave with you and follow you wherever you go, king, even if it is to the afterlife." The king looked, and it was his first wife. And this was the wife he took care of the least. He felt embarrassed and said that I should have taken better care of you and given you more attention when I was alive. And so, what is the moral of this story, guys? The moral of the story is that the 4th wife is our body. We like to decorate it with nice clothes. I'm just reading it from the website here, guys. So here it says the moral of the story is that we all have 4 wives. Our 4th wife is our body. We like to decorate it with nice clothes, sexy hairstyle, nice jewelry, but in the end it cannot follow us to the afterlife. Our 3rd wife is our possessions. We spend so much time gathering our possessions, but in the end they can't follow us to the afterlife. It will be given to other people and divided, just like the 3rd wife remarrying. The 2nd wife are our friends and family. We trust them. They're always there for us in times of need, but the furthest they can go is the funeral and send us off. Our 1st wife represents our soul. We usually neglect taking care of our soul. That is the thing that will follow us to the afterlife. Pretty much the fourth wife is one's attachment to their body, which is in the conscious waking state in the earthly plane, like for most people the priority. The third wife is the possessions. What a person possesses, in some sense. If for the king it would be his kingdom. And so objects, in some sense, their ownership goes to others. It's as if, that's the cool thing about existence. Technically, nobody can own anything, because it's like an object cannot own an object. And if an object cannot own an object, what is it that's owning the object? And the subject is not an object. To be honest, we are unknown multidimensional beings, and we have accepted the story of the dualistic human being too soon. And so the mystery of a multidimensional being in all the worlds that has access to it remains. Really, it's unknown. The greatest truth is that the unknown is unknown, and it's okay. It's okay to be an unknown being in an unknown world when the knowledge is incomplete. When, our greatest scientific minds can attempt to index the universe, but because our technology is behind, our truths remain as fiction. Sometimes I have this idea where could the imperfection of a lesser dimension, could the perfection of a lesser dimension be the imperfection of a greater dimension? Could it be that actually this world is designed for an immortal or infinite type of being? Because when we look at it in a finite way, it's as if why is the universe so big, right? That means from a theological perspective, it would be as if why did God create all the other galaxies and planets and all the other stuff? Why wasn't there just Earth? That means why wasn't just the planet in a dark room? Why is there in the darkness the potential of other universes and realities? The world is too big for human life. The planet is even too big for human life. It's like a bird being like, man, there's so many branches I can land on, and the sky is endless, like I could endlessly fly, right? And so the question becomes really neither trying to be an infinite or a finite being, but becomes serving the moment. you know. I had a conversation with my father once, and I asked him, what metaphor would you see the whole world or universe as, or how do you see it so far? And my father told me he sees it as a school, you know, where it's as if all the souls in the realm are like kids in different grades, you know. And so it's as if once you graduate, you no longer need to be, in the school, right? But for me, my response to him, was that my view was that it's not a school. It's literally like a party, and we are waiting for the host. Imagine you're sitting at this great party, right? And like the person who's started the whole party, who set up the party, in some sense hasn't arrived. And so it's as if looking for the host of the party, right? And to me, that's what I feel this life is. Really, human beings upon... here, let me tell you, when you look at the purpose of lesser species, let's say for lesser animals, like for example squirrels, birds, lions, tigers, snakes, crocodiles, like when you look at these creatures, they are actually here to become grounded in their instinct, let me see how I could say it. It's as if lesser animals don't have questions. They're content with their ecosystem's answer to their life force. But the human intelligence is not just content with the known. That means the purpose of lesser animals, just find harmony and continue. But when it comes to the human being, it's as if from all the scenarios that the realm can be probabilized, perceived in, you notice the unknown. This is in my view at least, from my own mystical innate knowing, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is a type of samadhi that the yogi attains, which in all the next reincarnations, the yogi will automatically go towards enlightenment, right? That occurs when we realize that the hardest and most impossible task in this world is to trust the unknown. I don't know if people know this, but for example, me being raised in Iran, like the holy book of Islam, in the beginning, the first page, it says this is a book for those who have faith in the unseen, right? And so that to me is very fascinating, because let's say right now, whoever you are listening to me, we brought all the greatest teachers in the cosmos and they gave you their teaching instantly. And let's say you access all the databases, all the libraries, all the information in this world, physical world, in this known world, all the greatest known teachers and all the greatest known teachings and all the greatest known information. Imagine you knew everything about this known world. It's as if the only thing left would be the unknown. And human beings, from the beginning of their life, they are, in some sense, there's a desire for mastery. Do you know? Let me tell you, the moment a mind sees something, how would I tell you? The moment the mind, it's like the Transformer movie, that what was it, Bumblebee? Like that car was like this trash looking car, and the kid's like, man, this car looks like trash, and the car got offended, saw the car that sponsored the film, and like became that, So similarly, I'm saying the moment we see a possibility in front of our eyes, or for example, the moment Usain Bolt became the fastest person on the planet, there were children born who were wondering if they could go faster. You see, the idea is not a person standing on becoming a king of the hill in an inefficient system. The idea is that whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you are, in the simplicity of being able to notice the most complex value, it is how far you go forth. That means to me, I could even see a sort of mystical, what do you call it, a mystical poetic storyline to the whole cosmos. It's as if in another parallel universe, God just created manifestation and commanded it go forth, and it's as if whatever was there, it had no choice. It's another way of saying the universe is moving in a way that if we don't acknowledge it, we are in our own way. And for how long does a species want to constantly become free? It's as if be free already, post-freedom, post-enlightenment questions. These are what should come to the mind of people. Anybody trying to get enlightened, it's like you notice truth in an instant, and you're like, okay, truth is instantaneously being prior to any sort of effort of shape put upon a shaped world. Guys, I'll share a funny story. In 2016, I went to Rishikesh, India. There was this ashram called Niketan Ashram, and I just went. It was right beside the Divine Life Society, and anyways, I go to this ashram, and they have this event where they're taking everybody to this cave called Vashista Cave, I think. And this cave is a cave where there was some enlightened person, and the god Shiva had appeared in this cave to like an enlightened person, right? And so we go there. I remember like the bus goes there, it stops, doors open, everybody goes out. There's cows moving around, and there's just like tourists, and they go inside this cave, and they're sitting there. It's you could say it's like a group of people from the West and let's say Eastern Europe, and they're all there, and they're sitting in the cave, and everybody's trying to be like super spiritually like meditating, and I remember everybody was sitting there in silence. So it's like everybody goes in there, they're sitting cross-legged, and it was a small cave. It was like anyways, like maybe like 12 people could fit in it, right? And sitting cross-legged on the ground. Okay, and so everybody's sitting there on their cross-legged on the ground, and you can totally see everybody's like, yo, we're in a sacred space, let's be quiet and take it in. And out of nowhere, we hear this cow give like the most ridiculous moo sound, right? And everybody in the cave starts laughing. It's like that cow was like the most enlightened thing in that moment, In an instant, everybody's mindset shifted from the seriousness towards sacredness, towards the authority of freedom, right? I would say that every human being has an emotional relationship with their self. They have an emotional relationship with others, or I would say your species, and then you have an emotional relationship with your world. Now, if the emotional relationship with the self is turbulent, a person, it's so easy when you don't care for yourself not to care for others in the world. But if a person's like, wait a minute, we are the only ones who are here now who can build the advanced civilization. I am telling you, like, there are visions in this world, there are ways. You know what it is? It's like an advanced civilization is like, imagine, you open, you step out on your balcony, and you're looking outside, and you suddenly see a giant, colossal giant running between skyscrapers. Imagine, like it's as if that's what an advanced civilization is. It's this snowballing force that as individuals experience inefficiency, then the roars of the soul unleash the efficiency of the outer realms, right? The idea is that if truth is anywhere else, you will never find it. But if truth is instantaneous, here guys, let me read this thing I wrote on Facebook as a response to the post of my friend. I think it's worth a read. So I say, if you don't identify with the body and mind is yoga necessary, then I write, truth to me is how the unknown is being. No idea or practice can lead to it. It's like truth is there before you need to do anything. That's the nature of truth, guys. It has to be here or it can't be truth. You know, really what it is that all creatures seek advancement, and they seek advancement beyond suffering. The Buddha did something phenomenal. I don't know if people know this about the Buddha. The Buddha was born, Gautama Siddhartha was born at a time where Brahmanism was at work. Brahmanism is older, you know, more ancient than Buddhism. But in Brahmanism, there's a really ritualistic orientation. That means it's as if right now spirituality has become people watching like YouTube videos. But back in the day, spirituality was everybody was trying to do their own weird ritual to attain truth, right? So the Buddha, there's the story of him that he's walking by and he sees a bunch of people that are hanging from this tree, like from their legs, you know, tied to the branch of the tree, right? And then the Buddha's like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're discovering God, man, get out of here. This is our way of understanding God, right? And the Buddha says, this is, you guys are acting like bats, you know? It's as if this is not the way, right? So Buddha notices that it's like in ritualization, there is a certain percentage of an idealistic expectation on the moment. See, the idea is that if you expect something, you have defined the moment before the moment could happen. Right, so the Buddha realizes this. The Buddha even goes and does this thing where it's a very messed up, like very extremist asceticism. So the Buddha goes and sits in a cave, and there were these foolish people back in the day where they felt that if they get closer to dying, like they will see truth, right? And so there's the story that the Buddha hadn't ate for so many days doing this ascetic practice, and he had reached a point where he was too weak to get up, right? So he had pretty much messed up. And there's this sort of miraculous Jungian synchronicity where out of nowhere, this young girl comes to Buddha with a bowl of rice. Can you imagine? Buddha's like trying this ascetic practice in a cave, like he has fasted so long that he's like becoming incapable to even move as a person, right? And out of nowhere, this young girl brings a bowl of rice, like a sort of divine intervention. As if the bodhisattvas of compassion never stopped watching. The Buddha realizes the ritualism of the personality is fooled by its own design of expectation. And so the Buddha eventually sits by a tree. And he sits there so long that there's this story that there were these 3 demon sisters, and if I remember, the Mara sisters, I don't know, sisters of Mara, I don't know, but there's these 3 demonic sisters, and the Buddha's sitting beside the tree, and he has suddenly awakened to his nature. And when you awaken to your nature, it's kind of like King Arthur pulling out Excalibur, or Thor becoming worthy to use his hammer, you know? Or like Odin's nod that allowed Thor to use his hammer. So the Buddha sits there and he awakens to his true nature, and the moment he awakens to his true nature, these 3 demon sisters, they throw, literally, it's like, you know, tons of arrows get thrown at him. And this is all happening in the inner realms of Buddha. right? All these arrows are thrown at the Buddha, and the Buddha instantly turns all those arrows into lotus flowers, and before the arrows could hit him, they fall down in the ground like lotus. It's similar to that moment where Neo stops the bullets in the Matrix, right? The Buddha is like technically did that before Neo, but with it turning arrows into flowers. And so the Buddha suddenly opens his eyes, and beside him there's his his servant, because Buddha was a child of an emperor. There was this servant friend of his, like close friend of his, named Ananda. And so the moment Buddha opens his eyes, Ananda notices that the Buddha, something is different about Buddha, about Gautama. Gautama Siddhartha has become Buddha. And Buddha means awakened. It's a title. Ananda asks Buddha, what is this secret you have found? And Buddha remains silent, and that is the first answer to what truth is. Silence. And Buddha just remains there, and Ananda comes and sits beside Buddha, and that is when you can say it's as if before you find Satchidananda, Satchidananda finds you. I would say that moment Buddha opened his eyes was a moment where he realized that truth doesn't have to be a subject anymore. There's so many incredible stories that can replace our life, but to be capable of being like, okay, it's an unknown viewer of a known world, that is like contentment. And once you cultivate, sometimes when they say a state of mind, the state of mind is more how the moment is being rather than what you do. A shamanic state of mind is different. Like, that means a lot of people nowadays, I see they're doing ayahuasca, right? You see it in, like YouTube videos. And it's not that it's right or wrong, but it's that it seems that the way the shamans of antiquity used to do it was in a way where they had a relationship with the living world. That means if you are a materialist, I don't know, it's as if you're just taking, it's like the forest has become a medicine cabinet, like. But what I'm trying to say is that there is a guiding force, and it's like how the poet Rumi says, wherever you are, be the soul of that moment. And if you are somewhere and you're not the soul of that moment, the soul of the moment is the logos. It's this way of saying in front of our eyes, in our outer realms. We are the ability of an object. But behind our eyes, we are the ability of a subjective world. The mind is so fascinating, guys. Sometimes, it's like, how does the search for truth begin? The person's like, what am I? There's Ramana Maharshi, guys. He has this incredible way of saying it in his book, Who Am I? He says the ego that is seeking liberation is like a stick used to align all the other sticks in the campfire, and at the end, when all the other sticks are in the campfire and they're burning properly, you throw the last stick into the campfire. And so it's this idea that the human being who enters the conscious waking state animates as a sort of subjective mover of an object. This subjective sense of self is actually being an inner viewer of all our memories and imagination and the body at the same time. The mind is a mask for an unknown mover, dear listeners. And the soul, it's like we named the unknown, It's as if the soul was like, you don't have to name me, but I appreciate the effort of calling me a soul, Oh, man. So, guys, my attention has come to the chat section. And I would appreciate if in the chat, if anybody becomes a member of this YouTube channel, I mean, okay, maybe this is too much of a request, but it's like put your first name and just the first letter of your last name. But anyways. Somebody says, if you want to experience Samadhi, Shiva gave us 112 methods for entering. They are basically koans. If you can embody one of these 112 sutras for even a second, you will have dipped your toes in the shoes of the sages. My God, the sages had shoes? It's like, I'm imagining like Rishi Vyasa wearing Nikes, like Nike Snickers, sneakers, Alright guys, let me change this Final Fantasy sounding music. There is no enlightening people. Why? Because when a person becomes enlightened, the concept of enlightenment becomes unnecessary. And when the concept of enlightenment becomes unnecessary, it's as if it's a round circle. First, the spiritual person thought they're not their body, mind, and soul. But then the moment you realize the soul is the unknown witness of all that moves as an invisible mind, as an invisible subjective-oriented mind and a visible object-oriented body, it's as if, just like a person looks at anything, it's as if awareness is looking at what is being within it. For me personally, I don't know why, as a child, for me, the concept of, I think it was honestly the Gladiator movie, that movie had such a huge impression on me, because it's as if there is some value in one being capable of naturally being themselves and look at an unnatural system and functioning naturally in an unnatural system in order to align the unnatural to the natural. people feel like, too much love, kindness, and compassion is going to be like this fruity, too good, for anything kind of, utopia, but I'm telling you, no. Kindness, compassion, and love is a tactic that a species uses to allow the inner realms of all the members of an advanced civilization to express. Right? The idea of an advanced civilization is so incredible because it is in some sense the notion that an advanced civilization just wants one thing from its members. It wants every being in the realm to activate towards their most advanced state, and then the chances of a bunch of advanced beings are way better than a bunch of simulation desiring bound entities. The nature of this life is that people want reality, but because they have an inner realm and there's the inner realm and outer realms are different, either their inner life has to drop its desires, or their inner life has to in some sense try to make the outer realms look like the inner realms, right? That means pretty much there's two options. One, you can do nothing. This is the easiest. That means somebody was like, how do I save the world? It's like, do nothing. That could be an option, right? It could be the sort of, Umbrellian Academy kind of destiny, where it's as if you try to save the future, you actually destroy it, right? So that from that view, doing nothing is like good, right? It makes sense. But you can say it's like after you have gotten bored of being just an object in the void, the mysteries of how the subject is moving fascinates the individual. And I feel this is, to be honest, anybody who really cares about, like, just to honor the word, the concept of spirituality and the soul, just to honor the idea of the soul. I would say this is Mr. Within's, a sort of strategy. Mr. Within's, it's a model, right? So I'm going to share with people an exercise they can do, which I feel in the quickest time will advance them and will take them to their most advanced state. And there's nothing to promise because but I have no clue how other DNAs will activate, how other people will activate. Really, it's left to how much the person cares for the self, cares for the species, and cares for the world. If a person doesn't care for these three things, it's as if you're not human. You're not even civilized, right? So these are very important, even parents and the future generations will raise their kids and they will teach their kids to honor the most advanced potential in everybody, right? It doesn't matter how good or bad they behave, because good and bad is not only subjective, but at the same time, it's this endless loop of chaos and order. Like, for how long, like even in television, like for how long do we want to see good and evil fight? Like, it's like, it's like we've reached an infinite being's boredom, guys. We are finite beings with an infinite being's boredom. So this is the exercise I'm going to tell people. First of all, go buy a sketchbook. This is very important. Go buy a sketchbook, and buy a sketchbook that you feel comfortable, like holding, I guess, carrying around them. But the idea is you go buy this sketchbook, okay, and what you do is that in any moment where your mind comes to some sort of turbulence, right, it's as if the person, here's the thing, I'm trying to say, use a notebook to express your mind, to record, it's like write down your mind's expression in different states and study your mind's production, right? This is another way of saying, like, I'm a person who, when I listen to others, right, I actually listen incredibly well, right? And let me tell you how I'm doing it is because I have no expectation on the moment, and I'm just, when somebody speaks to me, their words are becoming images. And so I'm like, what is the film this person is trying to communicate? when you remember things as images rather than just written language, it becomes so clear. Everything can be known on an experiential, image-oriented inner realm level, you know? After many moments of training, and I would say moments where you can just go and be your simplest, most honest, effortless self of a being. You just become a moment of being, and then you'll notice the thoughts that come to your mind. It can become synchronized with your body, just like a person holds a pen and doesn't think about the pen. Your consciousness can move your hand without even thinking about your hand. That means a person was written a lot. After some point, they don't even have to look at the paper or their hand. Their hand knows where it is, I mean, you have to look at the paper at some point, but I'm saying, like, automatic writing, I've written a lot of poetic works, and the way I wrote them was pretty much, I would take a notebook and my eyes would be semi-open, and in my inner realms I was experiencing an emotional event, and I would just give words to that inner emotional event, and that would become the poem. It's all about trying to interact with your mind, right? If a person wants to know more about the mind, writing is a divine method. That means, it's like, for me, writing is like one of the greatest type of meditation. Actually, writing is the moment where the inner realms and outer realms are synchronized enough to express something. And the idea is that the person honors their being, right? That means if you're a person who's been good or evil, or you feel you've been, karma's been rough or easy or whatever, it's like, after some point, reach the honesty of the I don't know state, and then from that I don't know state, you will be fascinated how your inner realms move. It's as if trust the unknown, and knowledge comes to you in your inner realms. But if you don't trust the unknown, then it's like there's a sort of bunker of an idealism. So guys, 1 hour, 22 minutes, let me see. Alright guys, I'm gonna have a quick intermission. Just a few minute intermission, I'll be back. Guys, somebody's doing construction work. I can't do anything about the noise, but I'll try to wrap this episode up. We have the visibly invisible and the visibly inconceivable. The visible senses, invisible beyond the senses. Inconceivable, shapeless, contentless, or emptiness. This could be, for example, nothing. Now, I would say this means so visibly invisible suggests an object notices an invisible subject that is moving as it. When we come to invisibly inconceivable, pretty much I would say there's this remarkable quote from Kabir, where Kabir is this yogi. I'll read his quotes. I'll go into a quote tunnel later, but so, anyways, and invisibly inconceivable, this is where an invisible subject notices intelligence is being space shapelessly. This is another way of saying an invisible subject notices it is simultaneously being the expression of an inconceivable space. An invisible subject notices it's being an inconceivable space is being as it is being it. So this is the idea pretty much. Visibly invisible is the mind notices the unknown, and for this I would say the unknown notices it was the mind. It was always the mind. And so what I'm trying to say, dear listeners and dear species, the greatness of humanity has come to a very historic point where, just like how instantaneously we can acknowledge we are being a mind moving a body, we can also instantaneously acknowledge the inconceivable unknown is instantaneously being the movement of the known mind. What I'm trying to say is that the outer realms and inner realms are basking in the unknown, are just in the presence of the unknown. This unknown is the source of liberation. You know, it's as if it's like yoga is like a riddle, okay? It's like, how do you get out of a world that is an illusion? And in some sense, if you do anything in the illusion, how can you be free from the illusion? So it's like yoga is this strange riddle of how can you causally be free without causing anything in any world, you know? And the answer is instantaneously. I'll never forget it. I saw this YouTube video of Shri Prabhupada from the Hare Krishna movement during the 70s, right? It was as if there was the whole hippie LSD epidemic, and then this Shri Prabhupada was like this yogi from India who had traveled in a container boat, at the age of 70, and had come to and started a Hare Krishna store or something in a point where it was like, intoxicated hippies that were trying to get out of samsara. Pretty much that he started the Hare Krishna movement, and he was literally being treated like Cleopatra, like literally there's a video of Sri Prabhupada being fanned by a leaf. And so there's somebody in the back, right, who's like, hey, Sri Prabhupada, how long does it get to get enlightened? And Sri Prabhupada snaps out of his ego that he's holding in front of everybody, and he shouts, in an instant you can become enlightened. Why? Because the truth was here before we got here. That's the cool thing about yoga, right? It's as if the world is alive, and it's alive in an unknown way, and our human intelligence, or let's say the intelligence that we're being, is just limited to the humanized archetype, right? That means we can't fathom anything beyond human. It's as if, who was it, Voltaire? I think Voltaire was so ahead of his time that Voltaire has this quote where, let me find the exact quote. Voltaire is like one of the most unique, one of the most incredible atheists, It seems like that's how he's known. But he has this quote, let me find it, guys, hold on. He says, Voltaire says, if there was no God, it would be necessary to invent him. Here, guys, I'm going to post the quote on the video. Voltaire says, if there was no God, it would be necessary to invent him. You know why? Because the human idea has crawled through everything. The human idea has penetrated every subject. Every object is a subject. You know what it is? It's like eyes opened, they looked upon stuff, and stuff became, the stories of meaning for the mind. When Voltaire says, if there was no God, it would be necessary to invent him, that means in any parallel universe. Imagine some atheist built a time machine and wanted to go back before the idea of God was ever there, and eventually, in whatever timeline, imagine the atheist realized the concept of God would happen, because in the psychology of an evolutionary animal, upon acknowledging itself as conscious, it wonders about what if what is outside of me is conscious. It's as if the person knows they're alive and they're wondering the world is alive. And we know that because there was the idea of monarchies and kingship, it would be in some sense a way of saying that a person wondered inside a kingdom, wondered about the whole universe, the whole world being a kingdom, and in some sense, who is the king of the cosmos? Right, we can see that in some sense the causal position is held as authority. In other words, in whatever timeline, let's say, that atheist time traveler would realize human beings would eventually personify the whole cosmos. It's inevitable. Now human beings have personified everything, and really this is what love is. Love is how the brain, based on what it has access to, sees something in something else that resembles, poetically, as some poets would say, that divine mystery which we all come from, What is divinity is, in some sense, anything that happens in a moment that is unknown. Revelation happened from the unknown. Something from the unknown entered the known. enlightenment, some state that was known and in some sense entered the unknown. The question is not just, how are our eyes open, but in some sense, why are they open? Nietzsche has this quote, let me find it. Friedrich Nietzsche says, one who has a why to live for can endure almost anyhow. And that's what we need for the human civilization. We need an honorable and the greatest why we can fathom, For some people, the idea of God seems to be fulfilling, but I would say pretty much human beings should not repeat the behavior of their ancestors, because what's the point of them, being who they are, right? Like if somebody was alive at the 6th century and the concept of God came, I could totally see an authenticity to that. But when human beings act religious after thousands of years after the incident, right, it's another way of saying our ancestors would be like, why are you behaving like us, and how have you not realized the magnitude of God's creation goes beyond language? It's as if everybody who's religious, you are worshipping an inconceivable source. And that means you're worshipping the unknown. Which is another way of saying the unknown created the known. And the known is noticing the unknown again. Swami Krishnananda would say religion is God remembering himself. There's something called Hadith Qudsi in the Islamic tradition. Hadith is prophetic sayings, and I'll read this sort of passage for you. In the Sufi tradition, they authenticate this, but in, I think, traditional Islamic perspective, maybe they don't. There we go. So the interpretation of it is, this is what it is, where it says, it's as if God is saying, I was a hidden treasure and I wish to be known. So I created creation, then made myself known to them, and they recognized me. Okay, no, I think... hold on. I think it's the first sentence. It says, I was a hidden treasure. I'd love to be known. Hence I created the world so that I would be known. It's another way of saying, more than truth being important to the illusion is important to the truth. Humanity can never be alone, because we don't know what we are to even consider that being alone. The mystery of intelligence could be a field of activity. Our minds could be just how our bodies are like antennas tuning into a field that knows how to move before the body does. Free will could be, in some sense, the dance of another dimension. But the idea is that many eyes have opened in this world, and many eyes will open. And in some sense, what would be the grand journey of humanity? And I feel, in some sense, when human beings can honor their past and not be possessed by it, honor their present and not be possessed by it, honor their future and not be possessed by it, they in some sense reach a certain point where it's as if the past and future become allies of the present, There we go. If I can answer these three questions, this episode has been completed. What is the purpose of the visible body? If you ask my personality, I would say to give a podcast right now, but I would say, what is the purpose of the visible body for? And let's say we are having the perspective of self, species, world. Okay, and then we have self, species, world. Self, species, world. There we go. So, the idea of this is that we're wondering about the purpose of the visible body in accordance to self, species, and world. So, here, I'll do this. Oh my God. There we go. So first, what is the purpose of the visible body in regards to self, species, and world? Okay. So we are wondering about a visible self, visible species, visible world. Now, what is relevant to these is the movement of the visible self in time, in space and time. The visible of the visible species is movement in space and time, and the visible world. So pretty much all of these, it will come to what is their future. Okay. Now the visible self, the visible self is this is the simple answer. This is pretty much the purpose of the visible self, the species. When I say health, this is another way of saying continuity. Now, that takes care of what is the purpose of the visible body. So, healthy body, healthy species, pretty much, and healthy world. With this requires to consciousness of, I would say harmony means efficiency is greater than inefficiency. That's it, guys. Whoever you are, if you truly wanna, become a friend of this YouTube channel, this is the main ideal. Efficiency is greater than inefficiency. In whatever dimension that this algorithm holds true. It's as if the greatest thing about an advanced civilization is its potential, all that it can be. To be honest, the greatest advanced civilization becomes an advanced civilization advancing at the speed of light, and the moment it advances beyond the speed of light, it becomes an invisible or inconceivable civilization. So now we go to this part. What is the purpose of the invisible mind? So technically, this would be, how is an invisible mind moving, projecting, a visible self? Or I would just say, how is it projecting a self? This could be here, I'll put subjective or visible. Instead of where, I should just here. So how's an invisible one projecting itself? And then what is the role of an invisible individualized mind as a biological member of the species? You know, the word species, guys, should be held with great honor. We should honor humanity, and then from that honor we will be capable in honoring the world and beyond it. If we're not capable of finding a great view upon the moment, then we have ignored our ability to do so. The cool thing about the mind, that it allows the world to move in many ways before you actually move. Right, so when I say what is the role of an invisible individualized mind as a biological member of the species, it's another way of saying it's as if, how do our physical positions serve the self, and how does our physical position, and let's say, how does our, I covered the physical. Okay, how is our mind keeping the idea of ourself, and what does our mind consider to be its purposeful service to its species? Right, that means, do we care for just the body? Do we just want to see biological creatures in the world, or do we want to see activated minds where freedom has become the explorer's will to go forth? You know, to me, I was like, I don't know if I'm I'll say this. I had this vision that if we were to restructure all the educational systems on the planet, we would get rid of this idea of student-teacher, right? And in some sense, every person would be acknowledged by their name, right? And it would be, in some sense, let me tell you what I mean. I'm trying to get everybody on the planet to become explorers of an unknown world, an unknown world's future, rather than believers of a known world's past. Like, you know, the past is past, you know. It's like the truth of the past was the truth for the past. the truth of the present is the honor. It's as if the person's like, it's as if from a theological perspective, if everything is God's creation, every moment of our life is in some sense, how would I tell you? It's as if behind our eyes we are poetically, the eyes of the unknown, inconceivable source. In front of our eyes, we're just a character in a video game, trying to level up, I was thinking of what's a way that we can, very quickly get rid of violence, and I thought if we paid for kindness, if kindness, imagine every person who was kind, right? Like this would be a strange advantage of if in a parallel universe a benevolent surveillance state could happen, right? Where it was as if anybody who did an act that advanced and made the other lives of people efficient, they would get in some sense honor points, right? That would be it would be a way of in some sense getting rid of how would I say it? It's as if the ego is driven by its own power, it will not rely on the power of others. Therefore, the ego has to somehow rationalize that its greatest power is in helping the power of everybody, right? It's as if pretty much right now, people are like, what's wrong with the world and, with the politics of the world? And I'll be like, it's too much of a win-lose situation. It's as if 8 billion creatures on a rock, it seems like they haven't reached a point where they're like, wait a minute, are we subjectively holding our cultures as ultimate filters for meaning? And so this is where to be a truly human being, there's this concept of humanism, but I would say global humanism. Global humanism is a state where a human being has acknowledged that rather than they are a specific thing, a specific part of a hierarchy or spectrum, they are an awareness to the whole spectrum. You see, it's a way of saying the person's neither good or bad, but they are aware of everything that's happening in the moment, right? It's like the dualistic framework is choice-oriented. That means you see it in culture. We are so possessed by duality that it's as if people are more content judging if something is good or bad rather than actually caring to explore and seeing what something is, right? It's as if impatience, was in some sense, impatience is like samsara's way of, hiding how there's a hidden door to every moment to freedom. When it comes to, an invisible mind projecting a sense of self, people are aware of this, but right now in culture, right, and when I say invisible, guys, I'm talking about the realm where subjects exist, right? A person could be like, I'm a bad person, but the idea of the bad person is not physical, right? It's as if it's just an object's way to hold the moment as a subject in a certain way. Guys, I read the comments, and don't misinterpret what I'm saying. When I say an advanced civilization, I mean that it's literally like, what else do we do? What else do 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere do? Somebody tell me, I'm freaking out. Do you know? And I'll be honest, I have been shocked by the existential circumstance of this world, and to me it's such a strange and unknown event that it's as if any person who believes in language has ignored direct experience. When it comes to what is the purpose of the invisible mind, that means if you have an ability that can help advance civilization, you're on the cosmic stage now. It's as if somebody was like, why should I, care for the species building an advanced civilization? And the answer came, why not? Let's see what it looks like, right? Let's instead of saying that desire is the source of suffering, right? And it's hard for people not to desire stuff. So let's realign the structure of the outline of what the desire means. Let us say that all human beings desire to experience the more advanced life, and the most advanced life would be to see the most advanced life of the whole system. Do you know what that means? That means an advanced civilization is how the future is staring at the present, and wondering when the great work will begin. Let me tell you how it's going to happen, the advanced civilization. The songs of the advanced civilization will start to be heard. All, I would say, creative individuals in this, creative human beings in this universal sector will begin their greatest performance of their mind, and really it has to come to devotion, but not devotion to an object or subject, devotion to that which is beyond the voices that come and go. That beyond the shapes that enter manifestation and leave. Do you see there is something here more supreme than any story ever told? It's as if, what is looking through our eyes is the truth that has forgotten itself. We serve the mind of the species. The role of the invisible mind is to, in some sense, recognize the ability of seeing probabilities to every moment and then actualizing them. The idea is that if the world is a benevolent place, people can trust it. The moment people trust systems, they actualize in them. It's as if when you don't trust someone, you can't be yourself around them. Similarly, when a inefficient civilization doesn't trust its efficiency, it in some sense just remains inefficient or never becomes efficient. We all know that the extinction is like basic, right? It's as if everybody's acknowledging, oh wow, it's like not only people die, the species may end. But the whole point of the advanced civilization is that let human beings play this game to see in some sense if they can bypass the ignorance that keeps them from their, I would say, visionary eternalism. When it comes to the invisible mind in the world, this is where it becomes very interesting, because this is when the invisible cannot contain visibly the inconceivable. This is the second unknown. As a first unknown, oh my God, my mind's moving my body. Third unknown, oh my God, what is moving my mind? Right, and this is when you begin to realize this world we're in is alive. It's alive. I mean, obviously the world behind our eyes is 100% alive, but the world in front of our eyes is alive too. Because the world behind our eyes draws its draws its inspiration from what's in front of it as well. The invisible cannot contain visibly the inconceivable. This means that you realize you have been the life of the universe. Pretty much you realize you're a universal being before you're an individual. I've written here, you realize you have been the life of the universe before you could be the life of a person. Pretty much, yeah. The universe is happening before we were happening. We're happening as part of the universe that has been capable of noticing the rest of it, and not fully, but has noticed the presence of the collective unconscious. When it comes to the minds, we're all explorers of the mysteries of the realm. When it comes to the body, it's as if the physical realm is where multidimensional beings, in some sense, they think of like 8 billion creatures on a rock being a tribe, and the hunter-gatherer mentality now applied for the mind. It's as if we were hunting and gathering for physical stuff. Now we're wondering about how is a non-physical event, how is the free will moving and defining itself at the same time. So these mysteries remain, and so every human being should wonder about these and come and report back to, I would say, the vision of the tribe, where to me an advanced civilization is too smart to be violent. It's as if the power of benevolence is that it dissolves the shyness of genius to invent. You know, pretty much what I'm saying is that anybody who's suffering is most likely being a character in a story. And so either the concept, which is the character, needs to change, or the context, which is the meaning of the worldview, has to change. And so for me, I am looking at this species in 2022, and I'm like, okay, we can run much faster than we are. It's as if the poet Rumi has this incredible quote, which I think definitely suggests like where the species is at. The poet Rumi from 700 years ago, he says, you were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life? And the poet Hafiz around that time as well. These guys are Persian poets, you know, mystics. And Hafiz says, bring your neck out of that dark nest in which you hide. I shall pour effulgence into your mind. And what he means is that there is something bigger than the humanization effort of a brain. So now we go to the final frontier. Technically, for this part, the answer is I don't know and inconceivable at first, but now I'm saying, okay, let's say we've accepted it's inconceivable, the answer to this, but let's fathom how would it be still possible if it was to be. This is where I would say, has the self been an inconceivable, or here, this would be the question. So these two questions, I find them to be the sort of same level. The inconceivable soul means it's unconditional. Unconditional means it doesn't relate to anything. It doesn't need anything to be what it is. So an unconditional, it's pretty much saying, how is the self here? This is the best way to put it. How is the self unconditionally being? And then what is unconditionally directing, or I'll say moving the species? And then for the third, in regards to the world, how can the world be inconceivable? That means by the definition of a world, because we can't see its edge, it's rendered as a simulation even though it is not. And so the answer to how can the world be inconceivable is in the B part. It can just be it, you know. When it comes to what is unconditionally moving the species, this would mean the era where human beings have reached the point where they no longer need to be subjects. That means the ego is seen as a body in a subtler dimension rather than you moving, like the I being you, right? It is seen as an extension rather than the trunk, you know, it's seen as a branch rather than a trunk, you know, of a tree. Anyways, the idea is that when it comes to this is like, what is a body has to trust what it knows. That means trust how it knows it's being. The mind has to trust how it's unknown, how it's moving in an unknown. So imagine your body, it trusted the visible, and your mind trusted the invisible, which is the unknown. And now when the mind and body trust the invisible, something very unique happens. It's as if like the soul steps out of these two Iron Man suits, onion style Iron Man suits, you know, and it realizes it can reanimate them in any way. What really freedom is when Sri Ramana Maharshi says the screen of pure consciousness. That means just like you go to the movie theaters and you watch the screen and you know what is not real on the screen. Similarly, it's as if when you notice you have been watching your conscious waking state from the beginning. Everybody has been indirectly, subconsciously training how to be an existence, how to be a movement in existence. Now the only thing left is that, is there a pilot, you know, will the future pilot the present or the past pilot the present? Imagine time travelers came back and the time traveler was like, you guys got to do stuff differently, and people were like, we have our own beliefs, man, get out of here, you know. The time traveler was like, you know, the past was too caught by the past. But imagine a time traveler comes to the present, and the people in the present are so ahead of their time that the time travelers like, didn't I see you guys yesterday, you know, to its past. What I'm trying to say is you don't fear the visible when you notice the invisible. You don't fear the invisible when you notice the inconceivable. The visible is defined by what we do. The invisible is more about how what we're doing is being, and the inconceivable is being itself. And so what it means is that the human intelligence must have an ability to acknowledge the unknown without emotions, using fear to possess the individual in a context, right? It's as if, what is a mighty being? A being that can move in a mighty world. That is really it. What is an advanced being? It's as if nobody's advanced until the advanced civilization gets here. You know, we're living in the honor of that which will come. It's as if the future deserves our greatest effort, our furthest reach, and then it's like we're passing down the torch and we're like, we went ahead of our time and you guys should go beyond time, you know. I'll say this last quote, and I guess my laptop doesn't have enough battery and the episode's gone long enough. I'll leave the quote tunnels for later. I'll say this though, there is this quote, I don't know from what culture it's from, but the quote is, I think, technically universal. The quote says, when the child is born, let me find the exact quote actually. Okay, the quote says, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. There's another version of this, guys. Let me. Okay, I can't find the exact quote, but it's the same quote. It's just said a bit differently. It says, when the child is born, the world laughs, like celebrates, and the child cries. And then the second part of the quote is like, when the man dies, the world cries and the man rejoices. That means you live in such a way where before you exit this realm, it's as if you are, you are leaving through post-victory laughter. You know, that's the vision of an advanced civilization. You know, not just the greatest argument of all arguments in the outer realms, but the advanced civilization is the most beautiful future of mankind. Anyways, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings and namaste.